Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge. Don't buy me. Did you guys know that Bath and Body Works has lip tint now? I just want to show it off because I didn't know they did, but I needed to spend like a certain amount to like get a coupon, and so I grabbed one of these because I really love the the soothing lip tints or stuff like that. Especially because, I mean, I love doing bold lips on my videos, but in the wintertime, my lips end up chapped. Like, not every single one. Yes, I have some that don't, but my favorite colors do that. But I got this one in the wine knot, and I love it. I know, this isn't an ad. They didn't pay me to say that. But I just want to show it off because I really liked it. And I believe, everyone, we are on week 48 of 2022. And we got some great books to talk about, okay? We got some good things to talk about. I have 11 books to talk about. I only had 2 books that were less than a 4-star in those days. And I read a lot of 6-star books. Some of them are rereads, some of them a new favorite of the year. But let's go ahead and dive in right after I say a huge thank you to my patrons. I don't have anybody new to thank this week, but I did have some returning patrons and channel members, and I don't do like shout outs when people are coming back again, just because it would get too complicated for me. But again, I just want to say thank you to everyone. This time of year is such a happy time of year, and the last thing that I want to have to do is stress about what's coming in, you know? And you guys help me not have to do that. You guys help me to be, to just enjoy the time and enjoy that I get to have a really great holiday this year. I don't have to rush back to be back on time for a Monday morning or to be back in the office. I get to take my time with my family, and I'm so excited to do that. Like, you have no idea, I'm so excited. Also, everyone who had signed up for a holiday card before, your card has went out. My international ones went out like a week and a half ago, so who knows when those will start showing up. But my US friends, your card just went out the other day, so those are really fun to do. I had to break it up and do a few times to give my hand a break, but it was amazing. So let's go ahead and dive into these. Let me pull up my notes for these 11 books we have to talk about, and we're going to start with a reread that I did for a patron, and that was Heart on Fire by Amanda Boucher. This is book 3 in what was originally the Kingmaker series trilogy, but it was the Kingmaker Chronicles, I guess is what it was always called. But in this one, we continued the journey with Griffin and Kat. And I will say that it's funny because when I looked at my ratings, the first time around, this was my least favorite book, because there's a part of this book that is really annoying. It feels like we just get stuck in the mud and nothing happens. And this time around, I think it was my favorite one, because I've shared when I've reviewed these that Griffin just kind of annoyed me a lot. Like, he made me roll my eyes, and he frustrated me with his possessiveness and like making the heroine feel stupid sometimes, and that was really frustrating for me. But this one, this time around, I really appreciated it a lot more for what it was, and I appreciated Griffin more because in this one, he really has her back when she's dealing with a lot of the gods and their meddling. So yeah, this is book 3 in the series, so I'm not going to explain it all again, but Catalina Fisa she's like a princess, but she also was chosen by the gods for a special purpose, and so she has certain powers, and she also lived with gods who helped her when she was young, but she didn't know that they were the gods. They were kind of undercover because they weren't supposed to interfere with her, but also they kind of did. And it was just, it's a lot. So this one, I think I gave it 4 stars this time. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars this time, and it's a 2 on the spice scale. And yeah, it wasn't as frustrating this time. That's the compliment I can give it. I am excited to finally read A Curse of Queens, because I know that my patron who picked all of these, she also wants me to do that one. And I had originally had like an arc of that book, and I just wasn't pulled back into it. Now, I am glad in some sense that I reread all of these, and now I feel more prepared to read that one. So we shall see what happens. But yeah, it was a good way to round it out this time, but it does feel like it stops pretty abruptly, and it makes sense now that there's more coming. It's just, I feel like there was such a long break between the end of Kingmakers and then what this next one is, and we are going to be switching to a different romance, which I'm pretty excited to do that. I'm excited to switch to a different romance, being that Griffin was not my favorite in this, but I'm intrigued about how it's going to go. So yeah. Then I read an arc of The Frat Boy by Nikki Sloan, and this comes out on the 6th. And I, of course, was excited. This is the next book in the Nashville neighborhood. So I was excited leading up to it. I hadn't really read the blurb. So I mistakenly thought that this was going to be another like reverse age gap. And that it was going to be, you know, like maybe one of the people living in the Nashville neighborhood, and then like a college boy or something, you know, a little bit like The Pool Boy, but you know, with a different plot or something. And this was not. These were actually both characters in college. So when I started reading the book and I saw that, I got really nervous right away, because I don't know, I don't pick up many books with people in college anymore. Like, there's very few authors that I trust to do that. But I really trust Nikki Sloan, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep going with this story, and we'll see what happens. And this starts out definitely with an enemies to lovers, but also kind of a like misunderstanding of a person is what I would say. But we have Madison, who is in a sorority, and we have Colin, who's in a fraternity, and there are these like Greek wars that are happening, like not as in like there's a war, but a war as in like they're doing competition. And in the beginning, there's some cheating that the fraternity does that causes the sorority to lose, and Madison gets so pissed off about this. And when she calls them out about cheating, they like cover it up. And then she makes a mistake, and she kind of starts a mud fight, and it ends up really embarrassing the Greek life, and they have to have consequences or they're going to lose some of their funding. So the head of like the sorority and the head of the fraternity, they kick these two out. Now, for different reasons, these two needed to live where they were living. The heroine, she's kind of estranged from her family. We find out why as we read the book. But the hero, he definitely seems more like a typical frat boy who has gotten himself in these own problems, and he's kind of estranged from his family because he's made some mistakes, and he's really kind of on his last leg. And his family, his parents are very much like holding his feet to the fire, and if he fucks up, he's out of there. Like, there's a very like heavy sword above his head that he would be cut off, and like they pay for his college and he would be screwed. So it's not that he's this perfect kid, but his parents are like overly harsh to him for the mistakes that he made as like a younger guy. So he can't tell his parents he got kicked out of his fraternity because they would like disown him. So they're both in a pickle. They both end up answering an ad for this house. There's this house where normally 6 people live there, and they make corn there. I don't know if I have to say that on YouTube like you do on TikTok, but whatever. I did. It's fine. And they both answer this ad, and there is this couple, Scott and Nina, who, if you've read the Blindfold Club series, particularly the novellas from that series, you might recognize their names. They met because of an adult like film shoot or whatever. And Scott now is like a director, but he also will star in things. And they started this house, which is in the Nashville neighborhood, where like it's usually college kids because they're the best looking and all these things. And they will have 4 others plus themselves like live there, and they just have to shoot 4 videos a month to cover their rent and expenses, and anything extra they do, they get paid for that over the top. And so both Scott and Nina are willing to do this, or not Scott and Nina do this. Madison, she has always been kind of like wanting to explore more of her sexuality and do different things. And the relationship she previously had was very like restricting. And that guy actually cheated on her. So she's had a lot of things happen to her that aren't fun. And Colin, like when they first meet, like they have to do their audition together. So they have to fuck right then, right there. They have to do that. And they're like, well, we're going to be professional about this because we both need this job. And they kind of are trying to convince the other person to quit, but they're like, this is the perfect opportunity. I'm going to take it. And so they end up doing it and having to be in this forced proximity, having to film sex scenes together. And it was really fun. It was really fun because Nikki Sloan has this way of showing sex work in almost a casual way, but it's still really sexy because they do both agree to do like all different kinds of scenes. So there was no like but there was MFM scenes and there was MFFM scenes that we see. And then there is like an FFM scene in a shower. So we definitely get a lot of these. But what Nikki Sloan is able to do, because there is a fair amount of steam in this book, right? It's not that the scenes they're shooting for the camera aren't still hot, but she's able to have this beautiful distinction between when they're doing it for work and when they start to fall for each other. And I won't tell you how, but Colin makes some great moves in this. Like, I really, really liked the kind of moves that he was making in this. And there are some revelations that come out and some people need to take some responsibility, like those kind of things, which I don't want to give away, but like those happen. And it was just really beautiful to see. And it was amazing to me that we could have these like pretty erotic scenes and they partially feel like work, but it's also like if they're in a scene together, the way that she is able to convey the difference between when Colin is touching her and when one of the other guys, like I think Joaquin is one of them, how like she's still very turned on and having a great time, but it's electric when Colin touches her versus when she's doing a scene with one of the others. And it's more like work, still very pleasurable work, but work. So this wasn't my favorite one in the Nashville series. Like I still think the pool boy is my favorite, but I really enjoyed this. And I liked how it's connected with everyone else there. And I definitely liked some things that go down with the homeowners association because we know we have Snooty Judy all around. So also liked how the conflict in this went. So I will say the trigger warnings for this are, let me see where I got them right here. Painful family relations. And there is some sex worker shaming that happens in these. So I gave this a 4.5 star and it was a 4 on the spice scale. And yeah, I loved that this was a new Nikki Sloan. I hope you guys enjoy it too. I hope you'll give it a try. All right, next, I skipped over one we got to talk about. I read The Song of Sky and Sacrifice by Lana Perchek, which seventh book in the Faye Guardian series. So this one is the Year of the Elf. And this one was between Forrest and Melody. And Melody, this one was very interesting. So we got introduced to the human settlement in the previous book in this one. And someone is kidnapped and being held captive in the human city. And so Forrest agrees to go on a mission undercover to let himself be disguised as a human. So he gets his ears cut off and like healed, so he has human ears, and he does things to suppress his mana. Like he does some things to suppress that so he won't be able to heal as quickly or reach the well. He won't be able to regenerate his power. And then Melody is a pretty captive bird in a cage in the human settlement, where she was actually a famous singer, like legit, we're talking like Taylor Swift level famous singer before the flash freeze. And she awakens and she gets used for propaganda. So she is being force fed. So definitely trigger warnings for that. But the guy who runs this settlement wants her to be the optimum of like opulence and the fact that like everything's great with the humans. So literally he makes her put on weight. He makes her wear costumes that are like too small for her so that her like boobs and her butt are coming out. And then he makes her sing songs about how horrible the Fae are and how their only hope is for destruction. And it's just this very sad world that we're seeing Melody in, and it's very hard to see. And I will tell you that our heroine has a lot of issues with her body, but it was fascinating to me because this wasn't someone who, like, she doesn't have a problem with her body. She has a problem with that she has been forced to make her body look how she doesn't want it. So she doesn't have bodily autonomy here in the way that they literally are force feeding her, and not like whatever, but like threatening her to like keep eating or they're going to hurt her friends or there'll be consequences. So she's like forced to put on weight and like be uncomfortable in her skin. And it was so heartbreaking to see. But oh man, this one was well written and I cannot wait for more. Now I'm all caught up and I'm kind of sad about it. I'm all caught up now. I gave this one 4.5 stars though, and this one was only 1.5 on the spice scale. There was not too much smuttiness in this one, but it was still really sweet. Like, oh god, all of these books are pretty low steam. They're very like horny people, but there's not a lot of like sex. And like in the case of this one, like they don't have the opportunity for very much of the book to do anything because they're under like watch the whole time. And so it's very interesting how that goes. But then, yeah, the trigger warnings, definitely fat-phobic comments and forced eating. So it's like, yeah, like she's being forced to put on weight and look a certain way. And then there's people that are like calling her names. And it's like, she wouldn't look like this if she wasn't forced to. And it's not so much too that she's being made to look obese, but it's not what her body's comfortable with or what she's comfortable with. So therefore, like, that's not a good thing. You know, it's not good. It's not good, Bob. Not great. All right. Then I read a new release that I wasn't sure I was going to read, and I ended up being happy that I did. So I read By Fate I Conquer by Cora Riley, which is the 4th book in the Sins of the Father series. And y'all, I'm telling ya, I did have a good time with this, okay? Now, let me set the scene, right? This is one of the books that I was waiting for. So the previous 3, which I've only read 2 of those because I skipped the second book because the first book was split into 2 parts, blah, 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 blah. I've made a vlog about that. I really disliked that. I didn't like the way that Cora was taking on the second generation because I feel like she handicapped herself in so many ways. And then she also had characters being dumb. Like, I don't care. There's no other way to explain it. She had characters being dumb, and she also had well-established characters that I love who weren't acting like themselves, and it was very frustrating for me. And then when I read book 1, skipped book 2, I read book 3, I was just kind of indifferent to it. I felt the same way. Is it Marcella in that one? I don't know, but Dante's daughter, I just didn't know what was up with her. She was making very reckless decisions with other people's lives, specifically her bodyguard. And I was like, bitch, I'm not here for this, what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. But when By Fate I Conquer was coming out, Mary from More to Mary, who if you haven't watched her, you're missing out. She's fantastic. She was like, Jen, I read a preview chapter for this book. You have to read it. Girl, I think this is going to be amazing. And I went and read it, and I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. So this is Greta Falcone and Raymond Falcone. Yes. And Amo Lucielli. I can't pronounce this. Vitiello. Why did I say Lutiello? Luca's son, basically. So Amo and Greta. And Greta is twins with Nevio, and Nevio is apparently a psychopath. I don't know, not really buying it. That is part of my critique of this because we'll get to it. But both Nevio and Greta seem to have different variations of neurodiversity, or atypical, whatever term they are a little different and they think a little different. And I liked how Greta's was shown. She for sure has sensory issues. Like, she doesn't like loud noises or too many people. She doesn't like to be touched by people she doesn't know. She just doesn't have a comfort with that. And so the first meeting between these two is when Amo is, because I think he's not too many years older than her. I think he's like 5 years older than her or something. So when he's like 23, he's actually engaged to someone else, not someone he wants to be engaged to. It's a forced thing. Anyway, I'm not going to go into full details for this one because I just want to get to what I loved and what I didn't love. But, and so him and Luca go to Las Vegas to have some discussions with Ramo because their peace treaty has been a little so-so, and they want to try to work it out. And in this, Greta is, I think she's 19 in this, and she's dancing in her studio, and he goes to the bathroom and he sees her, and then there's like the house alarm gets tripped for a different reason, and so she goes running after her dog, and he like follows after her, and they end up getting trapped in the basement together. And so the way that the Falcone's house works is that it like locks it down into like 10 or 12 different rooms, so everything immediately like locks down, and then they have to wait for the guards and her like uncles and stuff to check room by room and make sure that, you know, who broke the alarm or whatever. And so they end up getting stuck in a room together because they chased after her dog. And it's really cold in this room because it's one down in the basement. And so Greta, without any guile, like asks for his shirt because she was wearing her like ballerina leotard and she's cold. And so he's like, girl, I could get in so much trouble if they find me without my shirt. But he doesn't want her to be cold. So he gives her his shirt and he's rubbing warmth into her feet. And she's like, I don't feel weird being with him. And so they have this moment of connection. And then they get found and it's very awkward. And he's like, nothing happened. And literally like Greta is like, I wouldn't lie to you. I don't know this person. I wouldn't help you. I asked for his shirt. He was keeping me warm. Nothing's happening. And they're still like, we don't like it. So Amo gets like put on watch, right? But anyway, he goes home and 2 weeks later, it's her birthday. And he reaches out to his cousin Aurora, right? Because Fabiano is the younger, like the brother-in-law of Luca, even though like they don't speak, blah, blah, blah. And Aurora is his cousin. So he calls Aurora, who her and Gretel aren't like tight or anything, even though they live like in the same cul-de-sac because everyone lives near each other. But Aurora like sneaks in, well, not even sneaks in. She goes to visit Greta, gives Greta the phone and says, Amo wanted to wish you a happy birthday. And so then he does. And anyway, a few more clandestine meetings happen and they're starting to have feelings. And so what ends up like happening, because I mean, these are kind of sort of spoilers, but also to tell you what I love and don't love, like their feelings get big really fast. Amo wants to break his engagement to have her, and some shit goes down that doesn't happen. And Amo and Greta, it seems like it won't happen. And when they reconnect, they'll either be able to get their families to have peace, or they'll have to break from both their families, which is something that weighs very heavily on Greta because she saw what it's been like for her mother, because that's what happened to her. She fell for the enemy. Granted, she was fucking kidnapped by the enemy and, you know, not raped by him, but like, you know, seduced. We'll call it what it is. Like, she gets seduced by him, and her family has never spoken to her again. And Greta doesn't want that to happen. So, yeah. So, the things that I loved these characters. I did. And it's the first time in a while I've really loved the characters. I feel like they are fleshed out better than other ones, and their character arcs are great. Like, from the time when she's 12 and he's like 17, and then they skip ahead 7, like they don't meet each other at that time, but like we see who they are when they're teenagers, and then we see who they are later on, and then even like later on who they become, and the way that they, you know, fall in love, and the way that they try to share that with their families, who both have had like difficult love stories. They both have. And Amo, I thought he was going to be one way, because I will tell you, like, there is technical cheating in this book. Like, either way you look at it, like, either if you believe it's cheating because he's in love with her and he's with a wife, or that he's not with his, like, he doesn't, like, sleep with his wife, but he's with Greta at one point. Like, there's cheating in either way. But the way that they're in such a forbidden situation where it's not even a speculative forbiddenness. Like, both of their parents have said, you may not be with this person or else. And I loved that, okay? Things I didn't love: the aforementioned cheating, the unexplained reasons for Nevio to be so crazy. Like, we see some crazy shit from him, like, all the way back when they're 12 years old. Greta realizes that her brother is a bit over the top. Like, that's me being nice. And, like, I just don't know where it's coming from, because Ramo and Nino, when we read their books, like, they have mental issues, okay? Ramo, he's the madman, but he's not actually a psychopath, you know? It's one of, like, he's not actually, he was made. He wasn't born. And the same with Nino. Like, they were normal kids who had fucked up parents and were in these horrible situations where death was all around them, and it broke them. Like, they went through, like, almost being killed by their mother, and that broke them. Like, they weren't born this way. And it appears to me that, like, Greta being born how she is with, like, her neurodivergent makes sense. Nevio's I don't understand. And I hope to understand in his book, but I don't understand where his craziness is coming from, because he was raised in a loving family who, yeah, there's, like, death and violence around, but why is he so bloodthirsty when there hasn't been any events in his life that made him that way? So I don't understand. And maybe I will when we see his book. I'm now more willing to trust her for that, because I do know how she writes psychopaths and how she writes crazy people, but I'm not, you know what I mean, like, the evil crazy people. And that one is going to be, like, a brother's best friend, because it's going to be Aurora and Nevio. And I've never really seen a hero who's like a psychopath in, like, a friends to lover scenario, so I'm intrigued. But anyway, I ended up giving this 4 stars because there were things I didn't care for, but overall this was such an improvement to me, and I had such a fun time reading it. I read it all in one sitting. I couldn't put it down. It had me hooked. It still isn't anywhere near her best, in my opinion, but I really had a good time, and so maybe I'm seeing it through rose-colored glasses because it feels so positive to me, but I don't know. And particularly if you liked Ramo and Nino's books, if those are the ones that are your fave, I think you should read this one. Don't read the other ones. Don't read those. Start with this one, and I think you could have a great time with it. So yeah, it also had a 2.5 on the spice scale. All right, next I had a fanfic, which I'll just talk about pretty quickly because it was a quickie anyway, but it was Be My Mitten by Little Morph, and this one was an age gap. This was a Hermione and Severus, and I can't remember how they get together in this one. It's already left my head because I have another fanfic to talk about too, so I can't remember. But I think this one, I think they're both grown-ups in this one. Like, I think they're maybe both teacher. I honestly can't remember because I didn't love this one, but it had some good kinks in it. That was a fun time. So this was a 3.5, and it was a 4 on the spice scale, and I'll link it down below if you want to try it. I'm sorry that I can't remember more about it. Oopsie. All right, then I did a reread of The Temptation of a Highlander. I am annotating this for a viewer, and this is one of my rereads for 2022, so I won't say much about this. I've talked about this book a lot, and I will be talking about it even more. So in December of every year, this is the 3rd or 4th year I've done it, I reread all the books that I've given the highest rating to. For me, this now means all of my 6-star books. Before it was like my favorite 5 stars or whatever, and I reread them. and I rate them on a scale of 1 to 50 using some different things, and then it helps me decide what my favorite book of the year is. So this one was also picked by a patron because of that, and I annotated this one, and I loved this. This is kind of sort of like a bodyguard for a woman who's being stalked, kind of sort of a like marriage of convenience, but it's very sexy. And as I said in the TikTok I made, our hero Campbell McPherson is 6'9", so enjoy. All right, then I read the new release Stolen Touches by Neva Altaj. This is book 5 in her Perfectly Imperfect series, and I'm so sad because the next one isn't coming until March. She's taking a break, which, I mean, good for her, good for taking a break. But this one was really fun. This one was a like rival family one type scenario, and this is Malene and Salvatore. Well, it's also like a hidden identity at the same time too. But the hero, Salvatore, he is a mafia don in New York, and Malene is from a family that has been banned from New York. That actually happened earlier in the series. I believe Malene is Bianca's younger sister, I think. It's the younger sister from the one in Broken Whispers, and I think that's Bianca, the heroine who is mute. And she's becoming a nurse, and so she's actually doing a residency in New York, and she isn't supposed to be there. She is snuck in, and the hero actually meets her in the beginning when he's just had a checkup at the hospital, at the doctor's office, and she delivers a baby in the parking lot and takes his jacket to use for the new baby, and he becomes entranced by her. This hero is also an amputee. He doesn't have his leg below the knee, and he starts to kind of sort of court her, and he finds out who she is. And then there's an attempt on her life when she's with him, not because they know who she is, but because it's someone seen with him. And so he uses his leverage as the mafia don to force her into an arranged marriage with him. And then he goes about wooing her to him. And it's great. And she brings her cats along who torment him, and it's fantastic. I love it. It's surprisingly like a slow burn because they were like almost together, and then when he has to share like who he is and she feels trapped, which I mean she should, he literally traps her into it. So yeah, it was great. I gave this one 5 stars. It's a 3.5 on the spice scale, and I love all the books in this series. It's great. And then the next book I have a whole vlog out for that's non-spoilers, but I got to read the arc of Anastasia, which is out on the 6th. I know everyone's fucking pumped for it. You should go pre-order it. It's going to be amazing. This book, well, the ebook is like 826 pages. The physical book, according to when I was just able to pre-order the paperback, which I will have linked down below, is like 650. But it has over 120 colored illustrations. This is a historical fiction fantasy romance. It's all of those things. It's historical fiction. It's a fantasy romance. It's a slow burn, very low spice. This has barely 2 chili peppers, okay? Like, just set your expectations there, okay? Expect the Sarah J. Maas long haul, but also expect some of the most beautiful writing, the most atmospheric. If you are looking at the images on either, like if you get to use your phone or you use a Amazon Fire, or you use if you can read this on your freaking computer, you will get to see the full color illustrations done by Lena, who is a goddess and so talented, like holy shit. And then I listened to the playlist that Sophie, she always has a playlist in her books, and if you listen to the music when it's time, like this fucking book is amazing. I had such a great time. This was a 6-star read. It's on my favorites of the year. It may end up being my favorite of the year. It's all the things we've been promised and more, okay? And this book, you guys, is going to have so much crossover appeal. I'm going to give this book as a Christmas gift to like so many of my friends who don't like spicy romance. And just because I say that it's not spicy romance, I want you to understand there is still a romance, and the romance is central to our success in this world, okay? So this is a fantasy romance where the fantasy and the romance are of equal importance. Even though the romance is a slow burn and you're not getting any of the sexy stuff until about 80% into the book, okay? I'm telling you, it's like 80% in, okay? It's a while. But the romance is still like essential to our success in this story. And that's what makes it a fantasy romance. And it was amazing. I have an hour-long reaction vlog. It's no spoilers, but I'm happy to say December 17th at 2 p.m. Central, Sophie and a special guest, and no, I don't mean Business Daddy, a different special guest, are going to be joining me, and we will talk mostly non-spoilers, but then we will talk some spoilers at the end because I need to ask Mama some questions, and we're going to do it. So she's going to be here. It's going to be amazing. So make sure you read it. It will take you some time, but just soak it all in. Just soak it all up. You're going to love it. You're going to love it so much. Then I read another fanfic, and this one I'm so conflicted about, guys, okay? So I read The Scales of Balance, and this is by One Red Shoe, and this one is a very interesting conundrum. So it is an MMF that kind of starts as an MFM, then kind of is an MFMF, and then is an MMF by the end. Like, this went on a journey, okay? And I admire the author for it, even though I got extremely pissed off around 80% into this, and I was like, wow, that just plummeted from like a 5-star to a 3. Like, it just... So this one is 10 years after what has happened. You know, Voldemort's been defeated, and Ron and Harry were actually like cursed. So there's something wrong with them. They have been like infected. Now, Ginny has had 3 children with Harry, and she has another on the way, and things aren't great, okay? Now, Hermione has been very like mistreated and ignored because she helped Lucius and Severus, who were both spies in this one, and they helped defeat the Dark Lord. And because of her helping the 2 Slytherins, she has been really mistreated by Wizarding Society all this time. And Lucius and Severus, they had left the UK and were kind of doing business in different parts of the world. And they've come back, and Severus is rekindling a spark that he had with Hermione all these years ago. Now, them both, her being an adult now, and so it's appropriate now, and they just fall head over heels. And Lucius and Severus, they have kind of scratched each other's itches before. They've been kind of a like, let's do it now and then between them both. And so they will like, Lucius gets to watch sometimes when Severus is with Hermione. But then during a part of this book, something happens, and Ron and Harry get outed for everything that they've done, and something happens to Ginny. And Lucius feels this connection with Ginny, and so when she gets a divorce from Harry, he moves her and her children into his home, and they begin a relationship. I don't want to tell you what goes down, but I was really into this. I was so into Hermione and Severus and Lucius and Ginny, and them like kind of being a quad together, like kind of like they're 2 relationships, but they would like share together sometimes, like this big beautiful thing. But this is an MMF, so that doesn't happen. And the things that happened to take us from me really liking these 2 couples together to there just being the 3 of them, it was what ruined the book for me. I really didn't like that. And I should have paid attention, because this was sold as that relationship, that this would be a triad at the end. But I was disappointed. I gotta say. So I ended up giving that a 3, but it was like a 4, 4.5 on the spice scale. And there are trigger warnings for domestic abuse, gaslighting, and rape. Definitely happened. Then I finished my reread of Always Practice Safe Hex. This is one of my rereads for 2022. I was also annotating this for a patron, and this time I listened to the audiobook. I saved the audiobook just for this experience of rereading it, and I absolutely love this. I've talked about this book so much. This is another one I won't go into too much detail because I have before, and I will again because it's one of my favorites of the year. But yeah, absolutely adore this. This is book 4 in the Stay a Spell series. So great. I can't wait to reread Ruben and Jules as well. And then the last book I finished last night was Once Bitten by Heather Guerrero. And this is book 3 in the Tooth and Claw series. And this one, I'm sad / I'm not sad, but like this one, I'm sad to say doesn't quite fit into the same kind of like Twilight fanfic that the first 2 reminded me of. but it still has those elements. And particularly in this one, it has the elements of the like vampire versus werewolf, because we've seen a book from the werewolf's point of view and we've seen a book from the vampire's point of view, and this one is both, but it doesn't start off as both. This starts off as Max, who is actually from our pack, who we meet in book 1, and he's going on like a foster tour. So there's something you can do when you're looking for a mate and you haven't found a mate in your own pack, is you can go stay with different packs and see if you meet your mate along the way. And he does. He meets this woman named Jules, who just got out of an abusive marriage. She was married for 10 years to a man who really belittled her and mistreated her and gaslighted her. And it just wasn't pleasant. And she's finally got out of that. And she's living with her grandma and working at her grandmother's store. And Max is in the area staying with Cry Lake, I think is the pack. And he meets her. And he's pretty sure this is his mate. And they're getting to know each other. And he is slowly rebuilding her trust and wooing her. And then something tragic happens. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, because this is a romance between a werewolf and a vampire. And Jules isn't a vampire at the beginning of this book. So the ways that this reminds me of Twilight is that full belief the wolves have, that vampires are evil, soulless beings who, once you've been turned into a vampire, you lose everything that made you human. And so there's a reaction that Max has that is devastating, and very devastating to someone like Jules, who is just trusting again and loves this man and is willing to give her whole self to him. And then he has a reaction that is, though understandable, devastating. And I gotta tell you, when I got to that point, I wanted to throw the book at the wall because it was so sweet up till that point. And I went and looked up reviews, and I was not the only person. There's a lot of people who quit this book right when that happens. And then there was a lot of people giving this like 5 stars because they were like, keep going, just keep going. And so I was like, okay, I'll keep going. But boy, did it get darker before it got better. But then the hero gave real good grovel. He needed to. Okay, he needed to. But if you love a groveling hero, you gotta get on with this one. Okay, you gotta get on with this one. And then this one had a cliffhanger. And of course, not a cliffhanger for their romance. We're good. But it had a cliffhanger for book 4. And I don't know when book 4 is coming. I'm all caught up now. And I really want to know. And it looks like we're going to be going back to Alaska for that one. So very excited. We've been away from the pack for the past couple books, and I'm ready to go back. So I did not know. I was like, I hate this. I hate all of it. But I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was very long and drawn out. And I do feel like the second half did need to be drawn out because he needed to grovel. She needed to learn to trust him again. Like, after it was so hard to trust in the first place, to then have to rebuild that, like, it needed to take its time. So it did need to be long, but that doesn't mean I had to love that, right? I didn't have to love that it took that long. So I gave it 4 stars. It was a 3 on the spice scale. I still definitely do recommend, and I thought that Heather Guerrero, like, that was a choice what she did, and it hurt. And I was like, boy, I don't think I can forgive this man. I don't know if I can. But she made him such a reasonable and kind man in the beginning. And because I've read book 1 and 2 and I've seen how bad the vampires can be, I do understand where he came from. So there's that. So yeah, I do still recommend. But anyway, those are all the books that I read week 48 of 2022. If you'd like to support what I do here, you can check out the ways to do that down below. I also do have my wish list down there if you want to send me a Christmas gift. I have some books that I want to add to my shelves. If you want to add to them, you can check those out. You can also support me through Patreon or channel memberships to help me keep doing what I'm doing. Thank you so much, my friends, and I'll see you next time. Bye!